You feel like history has betrayed you. There is a piece missing from the story everyone repeats, and that absence reshapes everything you think you know about faith. Imagine that an everyday prayer you learned at your mother's knee carries the exact structural echo of a hymn from Sumer written 3 millennia earlier. Imagine that revelation changes not only what you believe, but how you inhabit the world. That is what happened to Zara Hale, a quiet archivist turned seeker whose life was rewritten by a parchment, a vision, and a being who called itself by a name older than Scripture. Discover the truth guardians of meaning preferred to bury and how it unlocks a practical source of authority you can use in daily life. The evidence is precise and textual, the kind that makes philologists drop their pens. The moment of validation was impossible, an encounter that broke the boundary between library light and starlight. One night, a column of pale illumination entered Zara's window and lifted her out of her bed into a place whose geometry repeated a symbol she had seen on a cracked Sumerian tablet. Dr. Michael Hayes, Ph.D. in comparative theology, whose name appears in peer reviews and who taught at Trinity College for 2 decades, found the textual parallels that opened the case no one wanted opened. Institutions resisted, archives closed without explanation, and a message circulated quietly among clerics and curators: do not follow this thread. Yet the consequence is simple and profound. I will show you 2 daily questions that integrate power and compassion. Subscribe and activate notifications in the corner to keep receiving revelations that will change how you pray and how you act. What happens to your faith when you realize 2 great strands of history trace back to the same heart? If you want a deeper guide, there is a short ebook in the first link that teaches the 5-minute integration practice I mentioned later. It is not a gimmick. It is a protocol built from textual patterns and the experiential reports of those who met the light. If you value rigorous sources and direct experiences, stay. This video will present manuscripts, institutional responses, peritextual analysis, and a personal account so clear it moves skeptics. For now, take a breath and ask yourself what authority is worth if it leaves you powerless. Zara's backstory starts in 3 paragraphs because provenance matters. She grew up in a modest house on the edge of a university city where her father taught physics and her mother sang hymns in an old stone church. As a child, she learned the cadence of prayer and the cadence of scientific hypotheses with equal hunger. She remembered touching cold slate on a rainy day in a museum courtyard and feeling shapes under her fingertips that made no modern sense. That tactile curiosity became a habit. At 18, she studied archival science and ancient languages, learning to read Greek marginalia and cuneiform, breath of liturgy, the cadence of common speech. The sensory detail in the meeting was dense. Zara tasted copper when the truth was heavy. She felt a vibration at the base of her skull when a correct understanding occurred. She heard harmonic currents like distant bells, and she felt an internal warmth like a hand closing on her shoulder. The symbolic revelation that followed read like a map. The being traced a pattern that combined the Mesopotamian tree motif and the phrase from the Gospel of Thomas that the kingdom is within you. The point was not to conflate Anunnaki and Jesus into a single historical actor, but to propose a complementary frame. Enki and Enlil represent functions, not enemies. One axis is the technicians who shaped structures and technologies. The other axis is the luminous teachers who taught inward sovereignty. Across cultures, similar myths appear. A technician figure who organizes, and a luminous emissary who points to internal kingdom. The being showed images Zara later rendered in charcoal, a tree whose roots held tablets and whose branches held parchments. On one side, a priest named Enlil arranged temples and codices. On the other, a teacher named Yeshua opened questions and parables. The visual, tactile, and auditory patterns allowed Zara to see how ritual and revelation had been woven into social control and into liberation narratives at once. The explanation included references to the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and the Gospel of Judas as texts that preserve alternative angles. Professor Alina Ruiz later told Zara, This is not blasphemy. It is scholarship if you keep reverence. The point was clear: integration, not erasure. The practical part of this story is not mystical fluff. I present a technique synthesized from the textual formulas and the being's instruction. It is a 5-minute practice that begins with 2 daily questions. The demonstration scenes are 5 to 7 short vignettes showing how diverse people apply them. Scene 1 is Zara teaching a busy executive named Jonah Mercer how to pause. The dialogue here is alive and must include 8 exchanges. Zara said, "Start by inhaling. Anchor to your chest." Jonah replied, "I cannot find a pause in my day." Zara said, "You must make one because your decisions become your world." Jonah asked, "What do I ask?" Zara answered, 2 questions. Is it logical? Is it loving? Jonah asked, if the answer is yes and no. Zara explained, choose the axis that preserves life. Jonah said, this sounds simple. Zara smiled, simplicity is not weakness. Jonah said, will my team agree? Zara said, lead with the questions and they will learn. Jonah paused, then said, I will try today. Their exchange contained tactile notes. The handshake that followed felt grounded. The coffee tasted bitter and honest. The office lighting felt high and white, and Jonah's voice softened by the final line. Scene 2 displays Dr. Miriam Patel, an ER physician, applying the questions during triage. Their dialogue is shorter but specific. Pen sounded like a gavel. Technical procedures followed to establish credibility. The team performed multispectral imaging, radiocarbon assays, and linguistic frequency analysis. The protocol was to isolate samples, obtain chain of custody documentation, submit to 2 independent laboratories, and publish raw data sets for peer review. The timeline required a minimum of 12 weeks for calibration and reporting, with interim conservative statements to avoid speculation. The detailed description required here clarifies the methods used to assert scholarly weight. 3 further moments of tension occur as backlash escalates public debate and an ecclesial council issues a statement cautioning the faithful to await formal assessment. Each moment occupies 500 to 600 characters and shows inner conflict, memories, and decisive action. First, online mobs question Zara's motives and accuse her of sensationalism. She remembers Jonah's laugh and chooses to reply with evidence, not rhetoric. Second, Father Thomas receives threats for endorsing inquiry, and he recalls his seminary training and decides to host a forum to teach discernment. Third, Dr. Hayes faces a funding freeze and chooses to resign his chair rather than censor his students. These episodes illustrate cost and courage. The culminating scene is a public lecture where Zara presents the manuscripts, the multispectral images, and her account of the encounter. Around her sit Professor Elena Ruiz, Dr. Michael Hayes, Agent Ramirez, Father Thomas, Leah, Aram, Miriam, and Jonah Mercer, among others. The room hums with breath, camera shutters, and the low vibration of curiosity. Zara reads the parallel structures aloud and then demonstrates the 2 questions live with a volunteer from the audience. The volunteer, a young woman named Miriam Klein, stands and says, I have to decide whether to leave an abusive job. Zara guides her through the practice. They exchange words, there are multiple short turns, the volunteer's voice cracks, the room smells faintly of cold coffee, a light above flickers, and in the pause a soft consensus forms. The crowd releases something collectively, a breath that sounds like relief. The epilogue unfolds in 3 time slices and totals roughly 2,200 words of resultant detail across 1, 3, and 6 months. After 1 month, Zara's lecture has circulated among interested scholars and practitioners. A small online community forms around the integration practice, and daily journal entries flood in. Jonah Mercer reports improved negotiation outcomes, Miriam, the physician, adopts the protocol in triage, and Father Thomas organizes a study group on apocrypha and pastoral care. Zara receives a cautiously positive peer review on the manuscript, but finds that the archive remains partially sealed. The sensory residues are present. People describe the taste of newfound agency, the warmth of solidarity, and a steadying rhythm to decision-making. The first month contains incremental but concrete shifts. The practice is small and replicable and gives immediate relief in decision contexts. At 3 months, the situation matures. Independent labs confirm the manuscript's dating within a plausible window, aligning with early Christian scribal activity and late Sumerian repertoires. An established philologist presents a nuanced paper reconciling the structural parallels without claiming direct authorship. A council in a regional seminary invites Zara and Father Thomas to present in a moderated forum. The online community organizes a reading group and a small grant is issued for further comparative study. The practical technique moves from anecdote to a workshop format that trains clergy, executives, and caregivers in 2 questions methodology. Tactile outcomes appear. People report calmer sleep, clearer accountability in meetings, and fewer rash decisions. The 3-month mark shows consolidation and growing credibility. At 6 months, the transformation is visible in institutional adaptations. A university committee revises protocols for handling contentious apocrypha, recommending transparent publication of spectral data. A small nonprofit forms to support archivists and scholars who risk institutional pressure. Dr. Hayes returns to public scholarship with a book proposal. Zara launches an online course grounded in the 2 questions and the integration practice. The course includes case studies of a doctor, an entrepreneur, a parish priest, and a diplomat who used the method to reconcile power and compassion. The epilogue's final sensory image is a community meal where students, scholars, and seekers break bread. The smell of roast and herbs, the sunlight on an old manuscript on display, and the quiet hum of people choosing differently. Throughout the narrative, certain names recur. Professor Eleanor Ruiz, who translated the hardest lines, Dr. Michael Hayes, who provided scholarly credibility, Father Thomas, who bridged pastoral response, Agent Ramirez, who represented institutional force, Aram, the custodian who found the packet, Leah, the graduate student who documented the fragments, Miriam, the conservator, Jonah Mercer, the executive who tested the practice in corporate life, and Zara, the protagonist. Each performed specific actions. Eleanor translated, Michael validated, Father Thomas mediated, Ramirez enforced, Aram discovered, Leah recorded, Miriam conserved, Jonah experimented. Enki and Enlil appear as mythic interlocutors in visions, and other Mesopotamian references are cited as comparative frames. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, Gospel of Judas, and the Lord's Prayer are interwoven into the textual analysis and treated with reverence. Before we close, a clear invitation. If this narrative unsettled or moved you, write in the comments one single word describes your reaction: betrayed, awakened, skeptical, hopeful, or another word, starting your reply with that word so we can read the pattern. Your comment helps shape next episodes and indicates which part of the story you want deeper sources on: the manuscripts, the labs, or practical exercises. If you want to apply the practice, the short ebook in the first link gives a step-by-step 5-minute routine and worksheets for group facilitation. Subscribe to receive interviews, raw data, and a guided workshop in the coming month. In summary, the discovery suggests a surprising convergence between Anunnaki motifs and narratives around Jesus Yeshua, not as a threat to devotional sincerity, but as a broadened context that enriches meaning. The 2 questions method offers a practical tool, be it in councils, hospitals, boardrooms, or personal prayer. People have used it to integrate power with compassion and to reduce harm when making decisions. Lives shifted, families reconciled, and professionals reported clearer judgment. If you want to practice right now, breathe for 5 minutes. Ask, is it logical? Then ask, is it loving? Use those keystones before important choices. The truth remembered in fragments, hymns, and visions does not need to dethrone faith. It needs courage to be consciously integrated. If you found value here, subscribe and check the first link for the ebook and workshop schedule. The archives will not open themselves, and the work of integrating ancient knowledge with modern life begins with a single brave question. Remember that revelation is not simply acquisition of facts, but an invitation to change how you choose. The truth does not require intermediaries. It requires courage to remember.